Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
It makes BC less competitive in our market.
BC's Forest Minister says Canadian softwood lumber could soon face new U.S. tariffs and duties, putting further pressure on the province's already struggling forestry sector. Also,
when I joined ABC, I thought Mayor Ken Sim would help renew our politics and be a true partner in welcoming all voices into the conversation.
A shake-up in Vancouver City Council after Councillor Rebecca Bly is booted from the ABC caucus. And
as the world is globalized, organized crime is also globalized. They found the opportunity, the possibility, and the infrastructure to do this illegal trade.
A CBSA memo reveals shocking details of illegal activity at Canadian ports as Mexican cartels and Chinese criminal networks work together, trading fentanyl components for endangered fish.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Janella Hamilton. Thanks for joining us. BC's Minister of Forests is in California on a trade mission to make the case against U.S. tariffs. Softwood lumber from this province is already subject to duties, so additional measures could be devastating for BC's struggling forestry sector. And as Katie DeRosa reports, officials in California say Canadian lumber will be key as they rebuild after recent wildfires.
BC's Forest Minister is in California, pushing back against this message.
We don't need anybody's trees. We have to free up some of the tree areas that we have. We have great lumber in this country. We have to free them up environmentally, which I can do very quickly. But we don't need what they have.
That's false. He gets a lot of trees from Canada, a lot of softwood lumber.
In fact, Canada supplies about a quarter of the U.S.'s lumber, which is primarily used for home construction. Parmar's trade mission included meetings with industry officials and Democratic and Republican lawmakers as Trump's tariff threats continue. The Forest Minister found a receptive audience in the blue state.
As Americans that I've talked to, I think the president's comments are silly, they're embarrassed by them, and they want to ensure that we have a strong working relationship well into the future.
The head of the California Building Industry Association says tariffs will make it pricier to rebuild the more than 10,000 structures destroyed last month during the catastrophic wildfires in Los Angeles.
Even our president has noticed that if he were to add tariffs on Canadian lumber, that it will, at least in the short term, add costs. And we do not have the ability to take on additional costs, not only in our rebuild areas of Los Angeles, but also just our day-to-day building of attainable housing for Californians.
BC's Lumber Trade Council says this already battered industry cannot take any more blows.
Adding in sort of increased duties and then potentially tariffs, that makes BC less competitive in our market, particularly for our market in going to the U.S. And so it's sort of been a layering effect of several different issues that have really impacted the sector.
The U.S. already has steep duties on Canadian softwood lumber of nearly 15%, a rate that nearly doubled last year. That import tax would go up even further if Trump follows through with his promise to impose sweeping tariffs on March 4th. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
Vancouver's Electric Vehicle Association says many Tesla drivers are growing frustrated by Elon Musk's affiliation with U.S. President Donald Trump. The company's stock is down and global sales have also dropped. But as John Hernandez reports, analysts say politics aren't to blame for the recent slump.
Most people bought the car because they liked the car, they liked the technology, way before Elon got involved with politics.
Some days Bob Porter can't help but feel like he has a target on his back.
You are conscious that you're driving a Tesla and people see you, and you do worry about, will there be any repercussions?
A Tesla owner of 7 years, his pride in the vehicle is being tested. Tesla's CEO Elon Musk's political affiliation with Donald Trump is a sore spot for some drivers, especially as the White House targets Canada with tariffs and the vague threat of annexation.
Emotions are running high, so of course people are looking at Tesla owners like we are all part of this club, and it's not true.
In North America, a growing number of Tesla dealerships have been vandalized. Graffiti was sprayed outside a shop in Vancouver last week. The VPD says it's investigating. At the same time, the company's stock has dropped since Trump took office, while sales across the globe have slumped.
The people that were vandalizing certain things and talking down about Elon probably weren't going to be Tesla buyers anyway. Is there a small percentage that could be impacting that? Yeah.
This automotive industry analyst says there are bigger factors at play when it comes to Tesla's recent woes, namely rising prices, dwindling EV rebates, and more competition.
People have more selection in this space that they didn't have in the past. And I think that Tesla's going to meet that head on.
Still, Tesla owners like Vancouver's Jacques Courteau say Musk's politics could have long-term implications for the brand.
I'm really rethinking whether I would ever buy another Tesla. I think that he's really antagonizing half the market.
What he's doing right now in the White House has nothing to do with Tesla as a car or a car owner.
Drivers caught in the middle of what's become an increasingly charged political climate. John Hernandez, CBC News, West Vancouver.
Vancouver City Councillor Rebecca Bly has been kicked out of the ABC Vancouver caucus. At a press conference today, she said she had hoped Mayor Ken Sim would help renew politics.
By his actions today, Mayor Sim has shown this is not true. I am disappointed that this has happened, but by no way discouraged.
Bly says she was notified by phone just minutes before a press release was sent out. She says she plans to continue serving on council. The ABC retains its supermajority on council, represented by 6 sitting councillors and Mayor Ken Sim. In a statement, the party president wrote that Bly's views are not aligned with its priorities. The province has announced plans to cull at least 200 urban deer in southeast BC. As Corey Bullock reports, it aims at stopping the spread of a deadly deer disease.
It's been just over a year since chronic wasting disease was first detected in BC. Since then, there have been 5 cases found, all of them here in the Kootenay region. And now the province is working on a targeted removal to see if the disease has spread to urban deer.
If we can get about 100 deer culled in each town, that'll give us a good idea of where we're at in terms of testing for chronic wasting disease.
She says the province just finished working through a backlog of more than 4,000 tests from the fall and winter. Just the one additional case was found through those tests. But so far, it's unknown if the disease has spread to urban deer, which advocates say can pose a much bigger risk.
Urban deer live in very high densities. They have very small home ranges, which means they're in contact. And so this represents a huge risk for both deer in town and deer outside of town. This is probably the highest kind of risk vector that we have for CWD.
Chronic wasting disease is deadly and affects cervids like deer, elk, and moose. It spreads through saliva, urine, feces, carcasses, and even plants and soil. Zeman says once it takes off, it's nearly impossible to stop.
This represents the biggest threat to wildlife, not only in Cranbrook, not only in the Kootenays, but in British Columbia right now. This is our #1 threat.
The province will be starting the 10-day targeted removal in Cranbrook and Kimberley next week. The deer will be removed by one of 2 methods, either through tranquilization and controlled humane killing or sharpshooting.
It will be carried out in a really measured and careful way.
The province is also currently allowing a specialized hunt of deer just outside city limits in order to collect more samples. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
Roads are still closed and homes still evacuated in New Westminster because of a major water main break overnight. As Jessica Chung reports, the repairs will continue through the weekend.
Crews are still working to clean up a water main break that wreaked havoc on this area in New Westminster on Thursday night. Now, Metro Vancouver says it happened just before midnight on Francis Way, which is up the hill from here, and water flooded all the way down that roadway onto Jameson Court, which is where I am now, and turned all the way down there and flowed down to East Columbia Street. Now, it closed down roads and water seeped into a number of buildings here. And I spoke with the deputy fire chief, who said that this is the worst that he's ever seen.
In my 26 years, this water main is the largest rupture that I've dealt with. I suspect that this is the largest water main rupture we've seen in a long time.
He says 50 people have been evacuated on Francis Way, where the water main broke. Now, power at a number of buildings here on Jameson Court was shut down for safety reasons as water seeped into their electrical rooms. Now, it's been a huge disruption for people who live in and around the area.
But it wasn't until I liked that I actually saw water like shooting down the street. It's an old city. It's one of the first cities. And so the idea, the infrastructure is probably very old.
A spokesperson for Metro Vancouver says the pipes were built in the 1960s and are halfway through their life cycle.
Aging infrastructure certainly is a challenge for municipalities around the world. So it's not that old a pipe. And so we'll have to take a look. Once we can excavate and go in and take a look, we'll see what the cause was of the failure.
He says they've been able to isolate the pipe and turn off the water. The next step is to excavate the pipe to see exactly what went wrong here, and then comes the repairs. There's no timeline in terms of when those will be finished, but work will continue into the weekend. Jessica Chung, CBC News, New Westminster.
The federal government's tax holiday is coming to an end this Sunday. It was meant to provide a 2-month tax break on holiday essentials to ease cost of living pressures. But as Sohrab Sandhu reports, some say the tax relief was too short-lived to provide any meaningful benefit to consumers and businesses.
February 15th is the last day to skip the goods and services tax on some essential items and holiday favorites.
It was really nice to save a little bit of extra money, like on my, takeaway or going out for dinner with friends.
The tax break was introduced on December 14th on a short list of items, including groceries, restaurant meals, books, games, children's toys, and clothing.
It would be great if that was something that they could that they would permanently do, just especially with everything going on in the States and the tariffs, and it's kind of a time of uncertainty.
Others say the 2-month tax exemption did not mean much.
I think that it just didn't really make as much of a difference on your bottom line because it's 5% only on certain products.
I don't think they're necessarily trying to keep money in people's pockets. I think it's more of a PR thing.
At the time of the announcement, Ottawa said the move was meant to help families during the holiday season, providing Canadians with an estimated $1.6 billion in federal tax relief.
It was a better vote grabber than an economic strategy. Very short term. So did it change consumers' longer term behavior? No, of course not. People make plans on longer than a 2-month horizon.
According to a poll from the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, only 5% of businesses reported an increase in sales. 15% of restaurant owners saw a spike in business. Most businesses reported no change overall, with some citing declines in sales.
Small business got a little boost. It might have attracted some consumers in. That was great. It also gave them a greater margin. They didn't have to pay some tax, so they could charge the same price, and suddenly they were doing a little better. So business, small business, as I said, probably benefited from some of this. Medium-sized, big business, not so much.
As for the overall impact on the economy, it could take weeks or months to get a better picture of what people were spending during the GST break. Sohrab Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
Still to come, shedding new light on the illicit activities at Canadian ports, how fish bladders are playing a key role in the fentanyl trade. That's next.
I'm Stephen Quinn, and I love living here in Vancouver, BC.
It's a city with world-renowned beauty, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. In our new daily podcast, This is Vancouver, we're exploring the diverse range of issues and stories in this city, the good, the bad, and everything in between, as told by the people who live it every day. Don't miss This is Vancouver, available wherever you get your podcasts, and I'll talk to you soon.
A Canada Border Services Agency memo obtained by Radio Canada is shedding new light on illicit activity at Canadian ports. It reveals the bladders of an endangered Mexican fish are being smuggled through Vancouver and traded for chemical components used to make fentanyl. As Michelle Gassou reports, it says Mexican cartels and Chinese criminal networks are working together to target West Coast ports.
This is a story about how Mexican cartels and Chinese organized crime are working together at Canadian ports, trading something called the cocaine of the sea. Let me explain. This is a totoaba fish. It lives off the west coast of Mexico, and it's an endangered species because their swim bladders, or maws, are extremely valuable. In China, they're sold on the black market for up to $80,000 per kilogram to be used in cuisine, traditional medicine, and cosmetics. Their sale is so lucrative, Mexican cartels are smuggling totoaba bladders up to ports like Vancouver and trading them with Chinese criminal networks for the chemical components that make fentanyl.
This mob is worth in its weight in gold almost, and now it's worth in its weight in cocaine and fentanyl, and this is horrible.
We know about this because of this Canada Border Services Agency memo, obtained by Radio-Canada through an access to information request. It confirms Canadian ports are being used for this illegal trade. It says a new network called the Dragon Cartel, comprised of Chinese and Mexican citizens, has been started specifically to deal with these illegal trades. This Mexican journalist says cracking down will be very tough.
It is hard because this is not cocaine, right? Cocaine is usually is packed, solid. It's easily identifiable at some point. Meanwhile, this is fish. And how do you know which fish is this or that?
The CBSA report says totoaba is mostly being smuggled in frozen fish and shrimp. And West Coast ports are strategic targets for criminals because they connect Mexican ports like Sinaloa to critical Asian markets. Some things we don't know from the report. How much fish and how many chemical components are being shipped through Canadian ports? And when the chemical components arrive in Canada, do they stay here or are they shipped elsewhere? That matters because right now there is heightened political attention on the flow of fentanyl from Canada to the U.S., though U.S. Customs notes the amount of fentanyl being shipped out of Canada is relatively small. Experts say the totoaba trade shows criminals around the world are diversifying their partners.
As the world is globalized, organized crime is also globalized. They found the opportunity, the possibility, and the infrastructure to do this illegal trade in Vancouver.
They say it's now up to Canada to decide how authorities here want to crack down. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
The provincial government says BC's lowest paid workers are getting a wage boost to keep pace with inflation. The Ministry of Labour says the minimum wage will increase from $17.40 to $17.85 per hour starting in June. It says the 2.6% increase follows changes made last spring to the Employment Standards Act, which mandated yearly wage rises. Yesterday, the finance minister announced a civil service hiring freeze in the wake of U.S. tariff threats. And people in Williams Lake will be without access to the city's only ER overnight. The emergency department at Caribou Memorial Hospital closed at noon on Friday. Interior Health says ER services will resume at 6 o'clock Saturday morning. Patients needing urgent care are being told to go to hospitals in 100 Mile House, Quesnel, or Bella Coola, about a 5-hour drive away. All other inpatient services are still available in Williams Lake. This was the sunrise this morning over downtown Vancouver. A reprieve from the cold temperatures is on the way for the lower mainland. We'll have your full BC-wide forecast coming up next.
I think it's important to give a human face to the stories that we hear every day, the people that they affect. And I think talking to those people is what really gives us the true sense of the impact of the stories that we're hearing.
Thousands of people are marching through downtown Eastside to mark the annual Women's Memorial March. It's an event in honor of Indigenous lives lost in the area and across the province. It comes a day after Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim announced millions of dollars for a crime and drug task force. But as Pinky Wong reports, some at the rally say money should be invested elsewhere.
Families and friends gathered to commemorate the women they've lost in their lives.
We march for our loved ones that aren't here.
We chose Valentine's Day because it's a worldwide day of acknowledging love, to your loved ones. And down here, there's been so many women dying.
It's the 34th annual Women's Memorial March this year. On Thursday, Mayor Ken Sim announced $5 million in police funding for a downtown Eastside crime and drug task force. Martin says the money should be invested in housing instead.
How did they help the women who went missing and murdered down here? What did they do to help the women down here? There's homelessness happening.
Support at the march came from different First Nations across the province.
A lot of our families that come here are either in isolation or the supports of their families are not that strong. Our police system is lacking that compassion. These are someone's daughters.
Vancouver police officers are currently being investigated for the handling of Chelsea Porman's disappearance. Porman's remains were found outside a vacant mansion in Vancouver's Shaughnessy neighborhood in April 2022, a year and a half after she was reported missing. Her sister was also at the event today.
I think it's important to know that, although there is many girls missing and uninvestigated with their cases, but at the same time, there are still so many of us alive and present today that we can't just be taken.
The march routes moved through Main and Hastings, and participants made stops at sites where a woman's body have been discovered, like bars, alleys, and parking lots. Nicole Brown traveled from Morristown of the Wet'suwet'en Nation. This is her 5th year marching, taking part in memory of her mother, Frances Brown, who has been missing for almost 8 years.
It's very great that we all come together and we share the same grief, and we're a community today.
Marchers say events like these strengthen them as they advocate against violence and discrimination. Pinky Wong, CBC News, Vancouver.
Every year, volunteers come together to sew 100 red ribbon dresses, skirts, ahead of the Women's Memorial March in Vancouver. Each one is gifted to a family who has lost a loved one to the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls crisis. Santana Drever met up with some of these volunteers ahead of the march.
There's women, there's sewing machines, so I figured, okay, this is where I need to be. I always find sewing healing because it's therapy for me.
A healing experience with a cause. Tanis Piche is one of dozens of volunteers who sew 100 red ribbon skirts each year for the Women's Memorial March. The skirts are gifted to families honoring their missing or murdered loved one. The event happens every year on Valentine's Day in Vancouver's downtown Eastside. Many Indigenous women wear skirts to special cultural events. Jamie Smallboy started the project 6 years ago in Vancouver. Since then, women from Edmonton, Calgary, Regina, Winnipeg, and even Seattle have all reached out and started their own projects.
It's believed that the spirits are attracted to the color red, or they could see the color red. And so I thought, well, I'll make them red so that way on that day, the day of the Memorial March, their loved ones can see them and come and, march with them.
Smallboy pictures the woman who will wear the skirt. She thinks of her while she sews.
I was just thinking of that woman and everything she's going through and wishing for her strength and wishing, that she doesn't give up hope, and wishing and praying that her loved one comes back, that they locate her loved one. Because at the march, you don't have the time to individually tell them, I'm so sorry, I hope you find your daughter or your mom or your auntie or your sister.
It takes many volunteers to make it all possible. This year, Smallboy handed the project over to another organizer to complete 100 red ribbon skirts.
I've just relied really heavily on the volunteers who have done the project in the past to help guide us and lead us in a good way.
One lady will do something on a skirt, and then
it gets put down, and then another lady will come along and be like, oh, this needs to be done. Nobody needs to be told to do something. We just come along, and if we see something that needs to be done, we do it. I'm so grateful because I want to give back to these ladies that have been doing so much for their families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and I'm just doing what I can to help.
Santana Drever, CBC News, Vancouver.
A business group in Vancouver's downtown Eastside says policing isn't the only solution to social issues in the neighborhood. Mayor Ken Sim announced $5 million in funding on Thursday for a project that will see more police officers on the streets. The Hastings Crossing Business Improvement Association says the project is a good start, but other supports are also needed.
It's a bit concerning to not hear about the other side of this funding for things like mental health supports and, supportive housing and all of the other things, because we know that policing isn't going to solve 100% of these issues.
Police say the new task force will help residents reclaim their neighborhood and reduce the number of weapons and criminals coming into the area. With looming threats from the country's southern neighbors, some Canadians have taken it upon themselves to make sure consumers know where their products are coming from. How they're doing it, that's next. The Buy Canadian response to the Trump tariff threats continues. And for people having trouble determining whether products are Canadian or not, there's help on the internet. The CBC's Vanessa Lee reports.
With the threat of tariffs looming, Canadians are doubling down on buying local.
We see this one is very Canadian.
These Montrealers have created an app to make it easier for shoppers to identify Canadian products.
We saw on social media a lot of different lists of products being shared. They were not always correct, so we thought we had to find a way to centralize all this information.
Buy Beaver is community-driven, relying on users to comment, rate, and share information.
You can scan the barcode, then it will rate the product as either Canadian or not on a scale of 1 to 5, and it will rate it based on where it's made, where the ingredients and the materials are from, and finally, who owns the brand or the company.
Similar apps have launched overnight with a common cause.
And we've got a couple of ratings there. Peanut butter made in Toronto.
The Shop Canadian app already has more than 100,000 downloads.
This was about a week ago, and we were in our kitchen, and I was trying to figure out if what I was eating was Canadian. And I had to jump through several hoops to try and figure out what I was eating. And eventually I came up with the idea.
It also leans on crowdsourcing. Half of the 100,000 products in its database have been reviewed.
But it's cool to see that we're making a difference. I mean, in our wildest dreams, we were hoping to keep a couple $100s in Canada. With the traction we've gained and the people using our app, we're able to do a little bit more.
The Buy Canadian sentiment is having an impact on bottom lines. Family-owned Chapman's Ice Cream says it has seen a bump in sales.
I would say, yeah, maybe 10%. So yeah, very significant, and especially for January, which is typically the lowest sales month of the year.
The creators of the apps know they're not perfect and say they're working around the clock to ensure the information is accurate. A labor of love for their country. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Montreal.
Saturday marks the 60th anniversary of the day Canada's iconic maple leaf flag was raised on Parliament Hill for the first time. To mark the occasion, a number of events are being held across the country. Skaters started the celebration on Friday by unfurling a giant Canadian flag on the Rideau Canal. The event also featured speeches and the singing of the national anthem.
True patriot love in all of us command.
Flag Day is garnering a lot of attention this year in the face of Donald Trump's threatened trade war. All five Canada's living former prime ministers released an open letter urging Canadians to fly the flag this weekend. In 1965, the modern flag replaced the red ensign, which had been the country's de facto flag since 1868. The host of a podcast, Canadian History X, spoke to our Dan Bird on BC Today earlier this afternoon on the history of the Canadian flag.
And so when Lester B. Pearson and the Liberals were looking to create a flag, they really wanted to create a flag that didn't have any kind of colonial aspects to it, either to the French or to the English. And that's how we came up with the Canada flag as we know it. It was something that had to be unique and had to be something that represented Canadians, whether they were at home or abroad or serving their country overseas in the military. It had to be something very recognizable. And it is. I think it's one of the most recognizable flags in the world.
He says the process to choose the new flag took roughly a year, adding it initially received opposition by veterans. There is fresh movement in U.S. President Donald Trump's push to end the war in Ukraine. But there is uncertainty, too. With the war nearing the 3-year mark, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he doesn't believe Russian leader Vladimir Putin wants peace.
And I think this is his idea. And I think that all I've got from intelligence, and they said, I think, to my mind, that he's preparing the war against NATO countries next year.
Zelensky isn't saying anything else publicly to back up his claim that Putin is planning to attack NATO countries. Zelensky met with U.S. President J.D. Vance on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. Vance is taking the lead on diplomacy around Trump's announcement that the U.S. would hold talks with Russia aimed at ending the war. The Ukrainian leader also met with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. All right, it is time now to take a look at your BC-wide forecast as we head into this long weekend. It was a beautiful sunny day today, but as we can see from the satellite radar earlier today, we started off with some clouds this morning. That cleared right out to make for a relatively dry and sunny day with some beautiful blue skies for much of the province. Heading into the next slide for the upcoming precipitation in Metro Vancouver. Those areas will remain clear and today and overnight, but for much of the South Coast, expect rain Saturday afternoon around noon and into Sunday morning. That means weeks of below seasonal temperatures. We'll see more milder temperatures closer to normal in the coming days. We can see that green going right over the map Saturday and into Sunday. And as we can see, the next slide will show us some areas are going to still see a bit of snow action, but we are going to see that warm up. So even with snow on the ground, those milder temperatures will allow for some of that to melt. On one of the areas of BC, which we can see here on the map, the island has a high likelihood of seeing some snow flurries this weekend. We can see that by the purple and the white on the map, and it's most likely to come in the form of rain with a mix of snow. Into the next slide here, a look at the long-term precipitation forecast. Again, for most of the province, scattered showers expected for Saturday and Sunday. But as we can see, that rain will subside in time for Family Day on Monday, which is looking to be dry and sunny. And we can see that rain may return by Tuesday. Now a look at the forecast for tomorrow around the province. There we go. Nice and sunny in Dease Lake with a -15 tomorrow. Fort St. John -20, but we are going to see a wind chill there, so it still is going to be quite cold throughout the day. -12 in Prince George. Over on the island, it's going to be 6 degrees for tomorrow and similar temperatures in Tofino for tomorrow with some rain. Whistler, you're sitting about at 0 for tomorrow with some snow flurries. Same with Terrace and Bella Coola. Heading into Metro Vancouver's 5-day forecast. There we go. Rain is expected for our Saturday afternoon with a high of 4. That is going to continue overnight into Sunday with a high of 6. That is supposed to clear out for our Family Day on Monday with a mix of sun and clouds sitting about a high of 7. But as we can see, that wet precipitation is going to return on Tuesday, and that's going to continue for a few more days after that. Still to come, we take a plunge. Look at how cold dipping and yoga can be good for a neurodivergent brain. For Our Attention is a CBC Creator Network series about adults who have been diagnosed with ADHD. Episode 2 of the series takes a look at how cold plunging and yoga can empower ADHD brains to build resilience and confidence.
My name is Max Sannard, and I was diagnosed with ADHD at age 30.
And my name is Sophia Bietka, and I was diagnosed with ADHD at 25.
We've been noticing more and more people getting diagnosed with ADHD as adults.
And that ADHD is a little misunderstood, and frankly kind of confusing, especially for people who recently found out that they have it.
We thought it'd be a good idea to talk to people who've been diagnosed recently and are learning more about their ADHD.
And how to thrive now that they understand their brains a little bit better. And Vida is a yoga instructor and facilitates breathwork and cold plunging sessions after she found out that it helps her own ADHD.
She works in the equity, inclusion, and diversity space, and she helps make the workplace better for people with neurodiversity.
I got diagnosed when I was 28. It got missed when I was a kid because I didn't fit that description of like a little kid bouncing off the walls. It's not physical, it's all in my head. I'm running like 1,000 thoughts a minute. And when I'm in the tub, the shock of it just forces me to just get in my body and not have to think about anything. Having issues with like anxiety and depression, that was also showing up in many other ways. And I was trying to, doing multiple therapies to figure out what's going on, what's the cause of this. During that period, was when my therapist said to me, I think you might have ADHD and it might be worth pursuing a diagnosis for this. I'm trying to see the silver lining in it and trying to tap into the creativity and the benefits that I get out of it. I became a bit more intentional with, my health, the cold plunge, my diet, like mindfulness and yoga practices to help me just get out of my head and just kind of ride the waves that ADHD can bring sometimes. Holding our breath at sort of these precise intervals helps us really relax, get out of our heads, focus on our body awareness and really focus on our breathing, which I think is what you're hoping to get out of it. Awesome, good job. I got 2 minutes. 2 minutes, you got this. Yeah, keep going, keep going. Okay. Slow inhales, slow exhales. Your body's like, once you get past that initial shock, it's like, okay, I got this. I can sink into this a little bit more. And that's 2 minutes. How are we feeling?
I'm good. My feet are a little numb.
Yeah?
How are you doing?
Yeah.
I'm good. I think it's getting like easier and easier.
That's it. That's what you should be feeling. After the cold plunge, we have a period of rest or integration, and this really, I would say, is the most important part of the process, because this is where our brains have started to generate those really good, feel-good chemicals, and we're starting to integrate that into our bodies now.
That is a big part that would be really helpful for the ADHD brain, is just showing yourself in a very short, easy amount of time that you can do something that's really hard.
Yeah. So sometimes I find my best meditations done after a movement practice or get out of a cold tub, as I'm actually able, like, I cleared the gunk away and now I can actually do the work. Yoga also, from a very traditional perspective, operates like kind of that energetic level as well, and the kind of yoga that I'm training in, which is called Tantra yoga, it deals with how we use yoga as a tool to move energy. This is a really good pose for concentration. I help make workplaces accessible, equitable, and inclusive, especially for folks with disabilities and who are neurodiverse. In a way, I get to work on making places better for me and for people like me. How do we give more flexibility? How do we avoid excluding anyone from how we measure success or measure performance or how we hire for jobs?
Have you seen a noticeable difference of incorporating 3 major pillars of meditation, yoga, and cold plunge?
A lot of my ADHD presents as sort of issues with initiating things. In the past, if I used to hit a roadblock and anything, I would just give up and get distracted by something else. I used to kind of talk about it ADHD sometimes feels like I'm walking through a swimming pool, while other people are just sort of walking outside on the deck. And now I feel like I'm still in the swimming pool, but I have some fins to kind of help me move a little bit better. So that's what kind of the analogy I'd use.
It's a good way of putting it. I feel like we both identify with a lot of that.
Yeah.
Did you dump your head? No, you did your vice on your head.
How do you feel?
I feel fantastic. It was a lot harder getting into it the second time, but now that I'm sitting in this the second time, I could be here all day.
The Friends of the Garden in Kamloops, or FOG as they're often referred to, are busy at work preparing for their spring fundraising plant sale on the first Saturday of May. So while most of the country is huddled inside during the cooler temperatures, the greenhouse at Thompson Rivers University is bustling with volunteer gardeners keeping a watchful eye on their seeds.
I can't overwater.
We get started seeding here in the greenhouse over the Christmas holidays. So by this point in time, all of our perennials have actually been seeded out. But if you're have a garden at home, now is a really great time to start a lot of different types of plants. There might also be opportunities for propagating your own plants, and that can start just on your windowsill very easily. Grow lights are very easy to attain now as well from stores or online, but it's really simple to get started indoors in months like January, February, and March.
I am transplanting. These were seeds that were started back on January 8th, and we're transplanting them into bigger pots, and they'll probably stay in this size pot to the sale. So by May, they are going to be very nice big plants.
Really, it's really hard to count and think at the same time, Shelley. These are salvia plants, tiny, tiny little seeds, and we're planting 100 this week. And because they're so small, you only put them as deep as the size of the seed. You don't want to bury them too deeply. Then we're going to cover them with cinnamon. Apparently, a nice covering of cinnamon prevents fungus.
With our Canadian winters, of course, there's a lot of not just cold days, but especially in a place like Kamloops, a lot of overcast gray sky days. And coming into an environment like this, we notice instantly a change in people's disposition.
It is so great. It's warm and my hands are getting dirty and I like that.
It's never winter in a greenhouse. It's just a really great way to spend an afternoon on a cold winter day.
I'm a retired teacher, but I still go in and we do so much gardening in the classroom. The kids love to watch the roots grow on the jars of cuttings, and it's so good for kids to learn right from a very young age, and that's how I learned too, from my grandma.
Valentine's Day is a special event for a New Brunswick couple who fell in love later in life after a memorable phone call.
Brenda and I got together and everything's worked out really nicely. We enjoy each other's company. We enjoy traveling together. And I love her because I can go to Fredericton and we don't have to stop for a pee like she does.
Brenda Trafford and David Steele met 5 years ago through a program that matches volunteers to seniors who need support. David, who had recently lost his wife, matched with Brenda for weekly phone calls. Both said they liked the sound of each other's voices. One thing led to another. They met in person and eventually fell in love. Brenda, who is a widow, says she feels, quote, lucky, lucky, lucky to have found David at a point in her life when she thought she would never find love again. I am definitely a hopeful romantic, whatever that term is. Thanks so much for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, or as well, YouTube and our website at cbc.ca/BC. I'll have your next local news at 11 o'clock right after the National. Have a great night.